back to channel listening fans. I want to say muchas gracias for all the support that I'm getting out there. Today, I've got a singular focus for you guys and a singular focus on these here secondhand budget speakers. What do I have? I've got the Alta Audio IOs, stand mount speakers from the renowned Mr. Michael Levy. Now, Jason, how the heck did you go from wideband Zoo, wideband Tecton, and the F501 stand or floor standing speakers to a entry-level high-end stand mount speaker? Let me tell you something, guys. A little bit more about my personality. I like to go against the grain. I like to find products that have a bit of uniqueness to them and a not me too type of personality with their design or their philosophy of their president, owner, builders, etc., etc. I root for guys like Sean Casey of Zoo Audio. I root for guys like Eric Alexander of Tecton Audio, and I find myself rooting for guys like Michael Levy of Alta Audio. Alta Audio, not really a well-known brand out there quite yet. I was actually kind of flew under the radar for me myself. Real quickly about Michael Levy. He's actually been in the high-end audio business for, I believe, 30 plus years. His forte really was in the digital realm of high-end audio, more so on the Dolby side, DVD, digital audio, DSP. He's designed a lot of systems around using that technology and the surround sound systems. The story goes that a lot of his close friends that have seen his designs and heard his designs were really asking for him to step into the two-channel world and build some real special two-channel only type of speakers. And from there, he designed his benchmark speaker, which is the Celestia FRM 2M stand mount speaker. Now we're talking about a 55-pound, 29 hertz playing $15,000 pair of stand mount speakers. Really good looking speakers, but the performance belies the price point, and it's just one of those, you know, esoteric type of speakers that the few get to try. The Alta IOs, on the other hand, these are the entry-level speakers for Alta. These come in as painted at $3,500. The veneered versions are $4,500 to my knowledge. It's an additional $1,000 for special veneering. Let's just get into it, shall we? So, the specs. What you have is a 14.5 inch tall by 8.5 inch wide profile, and it is 13 inches deep. So it is by normal standards kind of a medium larger stand mount monitor. You have a 2-inch ribbon tweeter followed by a 7-inch paper Kevlar mid-woofer. It is a rear ported design with these mini binders or binding posts on the back. These are very inert speakers at their price point. There is a ton of MDF in these cabinets, which go with the design philosophy that these are actually a transmission line speaker. So there are two specific proprietary build points in the Alta line from Michael Levy, and that's the fact that his stand mounts and some of his larger floor standing speakers are built with a transmission line design in the cabinet, which adds to the inertness of the cabinet itself, and these things come in at 27 pounds. The second part that adds to the weight and the inertness of the particular speakers are that he calls it a damp hard base plate. So, you know me, I love to take stuff apart, and I've got plenty of pictures for you guys, as well as the spec sheets that I will post off to the side running alongside the video. The damp hard plate, by all intents and purposes, he calls it a proprietary material, dampening absorption material that lends itself to the additional bass performance, the tuning of the speaker. But when I took the woofer out and took the pictures of it, what I see is basically a doubling up of the MDF in this speaker. And so you have twice the amount of material at the front of this speaker, making it an incredibly inert and super well dampened. Aside from that, there is no actual like spray-in material that I found. Again, I took plenty of pictures of the inside of the cabinet, and you can see the what looks like just exposed MDF as far as I can tell. As far as the design language, Alta Audio has a very specific design language it adheres to throughout its speaker line, and there's basically two versions. There's the Gen 1 version, where the top of them all have this nicely machined divot or dimple into the top of the speakers, and except for this entry-level model, the rest of the speakers have a very nice tapered out look to them. And I will show a picture of Lelantos, the floor standing speakers, and how it comes out and then tapers out in a very nice looking curve. The Celestas, the newer Mark II version of his speakers, including the Alissas, which is how I ended up with these speakers. So the original owner of these speakers that I bought them from, we negotiated the price. He's moving up in the Alta line, and he is buying the Alissas, which are only slightly larger than these, only 1 inch deeper, actually has a titanium woofer, and they're $5,000 at only 1 pound heavier, 28 pounds. So I bought these off of him, shipping, and he was very gracious enough to leave the anti-audio or anti-cables jumpers on here. Those things are $100 a piece, or I'm sorry, $100 for the set. So I got these for $1,750, including shipping. And so basically I paid half price for what these were new, and that's how again how I ended up with these type of speakers. Very curious. I wanted to hear the Alta line. From that, let's talk about the fit and finish and the part side. Here's where I was having difficulty with the philosophy of the Alta line of speakers, at least with this particular pair at the particular price points that we're talking about, folks. And you know me, I will get into the nitty gritty. I will list out the parts. I will show you the parts picture by picture. If I didn't have the Tecton lures on hand, I probably would have been a little more, I will even say naive, and a little bit more forgiving. But when you dive into these suckers and start taking the screws out, what I found is that not a raw tweeter, but you have an Intex, a Neo 1.0 tweeter, ribbon tweeter, 2-inch tweeter that can be had at Parts Express for $79. I was really surprised to see a nice big sticker from Dayton Audio on this 7-inch paper Kevlar driver. Maybe I was thinking it'd be Peerless, maybe I was thinking it'd be C's, but no, it's actually a Dayton driver. I will put the spec sheets. The spec sheets are very reputable for what it is, but at the end of the day, this is a $52 mid-woofer and a $3,500 stand mount speaker. It's respectable in that the woofer itself will play down to 35 hertz. Frequency ranges and sensitivity. This is an 87 dB at 1 watt 1 meter sensitive speaker. It is a 4 ohm nominal speaker, and that really is attributed to the Dayton woofer that dips down to 3.1 ohms per its spec sheet. The designed range is 42 hertz up to 48 kilohertz, attributed to the ribbon tweeter for the high end. The recommended amp power is minimum of 50 watts to drive these speakers. Regarding the fit and finish, very high wife acceptance factor. These are good looking speakers. I definitely appreciate the design language, and once you've put the grills on that represent the majority of the design language through Alta Audios, from my listening position, they are very nice to look at speakers. However, I will say that I'm not a fan of the silver finish because it's not an automotive finish. There's actually no real clear coat. While these particular speakers were built in 2017, and I have no doubts that the original owner took great care of them, when I took possession of them, I washed them twice, thoroughly wiping them down with a very mild detergent. And at that point, I felt that there were the orange peel, there were inconsistencies in the application of the paint, and there are thin spots in this paint. So if I could do it all over again, I would have held out for a veneered pair, albeit I probably would have had to have paid a little bit more, because you're talking $4,500 for the veneered version of these. What they would be used, who knows? Very hard to find these speakers. Right now on Hi-Fi Shark, there was only 4 pairs available in total. So, it is a rare speaker from a not widely known company yet. Back to my rant on the parts. I got pictures of the crossover. I got pictures of all these. I've shown you the Dayton woofer. I've shown you the mini jumpers, or I'm sorry, the binding posts. These are $8 mini binding posts. They call them mini binding posts on Parts Express. The 12UF 400 volt generic polymetallized caps, $8 a piece. The air coil conductors, again, $7 a piece. And what really kind of frustrated me and irritated me is to see the 2 large sandcast resistors in there that are combined $1. So being generous with how well the cabinet's made, with the entire amount of MDF in here and what it takes to put together a do-it-yourself speaker of this size at this weight, I'm being generous in applying, okay, let's call it $125 for the actual cabinet material itself. When you put together all the parts, the cabinet material, and it had the tiniest bit of polyfill that was sitting on top of the crossovers, I'm going to say all in $330 per speaker, total parts, no labor. $660 for both, no labor, not including scale, mind you, for buying, 10s or 20s at a time for the particular parts. I have the Tecton lures on hand, and you guys know how I feel about those speakers. You know how I feel about them with the fact that just the 2 drivers alone per speaker is $200 a piece, or $400 combined, not including the crossover or the cabinets. So when you put a $1,025 retail speaker next to a $3,500 monitor speaker with the combined parts of $330, it makes me incredibly hypercritical of the speaker. So much so that I did some extra testing I have yet to have done with any of other speakers. So I actually went through and did additional tone tests and special bass tests, sweep tests. I wanted to see what I was going to hear and what kind of bass performance I was going to get, because they are so proud of the plate, the front plate, the damp hard plate, and the transmission line design and tuning of the particular speaker. And I can attribute it to it this way, that sometimes everything isn't the sum of its parts. So are there any car guys out there in the audience? Yes, you sir, right there. As a Honda and BMW owner, those particular brands, which I am fans of, they do something a lot of the other brands do not do. They will understate their performance and power specs at the flywheel. So engine performance at the flywheel is generally understated for those particular brands. And as they break in, they will outperform their manufacturer specifications, especially from, is horsepower, torque, and 0 to 60. Those particular brands always beat their manufacturer stated specs. And so in a way, wink, wink, they build in this intrinsic value for their buyers, making their buyers really feel like, hey, I got a little bit more for my money. The paper says this, but man, my car can do that. I kind of think, and maybe I'm off base in saying that I believe Michael Levy is doing something very similar there, where he states that these play to 42 hertz. And my test tones in this room, 18 inches off the back wall, I started at the 42 hertz sweeper, then 40, 41, 39. Once I got below 38, I was still getting a nice good tone out of these speakers, and it was very usable. So from 38 to 39 hertz in room, very usable bass from these monitor speakers. Once I did get down to 35 hertz on the test tones, I heard a lot of port chuffing and mechanical noise coming from the speakers. So, there are limitations there, and as stated by Dayton on the spec sheet, these do drop off dramatically at 35 hertz. So you have a speaker that's usable to what I'm going to call it as in-room 38 hertz. So that's highly respectable for a monitor speaker. I have the Zoo Omen still on hand, and I'm going to make a declarative statement to say that the bass energy and the room displacement beats the Zoo Omens. Didn't reach the Tecton level, but for a stand mount monitor, I would put the bass performance of these above the Zoo Audio. Now some of you guys are being like, oh, big deal, but that is to beat out a 10-inch driver. That's quite a feat. So, my hat's off to Michael Levy for that. But how do they sound, guys? And I know that, all of you guys are already screaming, get to it already. Oh, this is a quintessential audiophile speaker. When you get into these ranges at these levels, this is where people say, yeah, that's an audiophile speaker. What the hell do I mean by that? At these levels, when you start to get into finely tuned speakers, they get pickier about the type of genres that you play. And so I've become very fond of Rachel Claudio, her music. She's a singer, songwriter, composer, and she has an affinity for synthesized keyboards, synth bass layers, and I was introduced by her because of a TED Talk, and just serious wow factor with her, and I'll put a link to some of her songs that I used. However, I'm going to say these speakers do not like to be pushed with electronic music. I was scrambling to turn the volume down at my normal 85 decibel listening range. The bass that came at me was extremely aggressive. It absolutely dominated the phantom center channel, and it wasn't pleasant. And that immediately made me run through a lot of different other electronic music that I'm familiar with and like, Daft Punk, and just going through that, and it's kind of like, okay, there's a theme here. These speakers do not like to be pushed for some reason with electronic genre. But for you jazz lovers, boy, are these your speaker. Jazz, yeah. So here's the best way, in a better contextual way for my return viewers. Since the Tecton lowers are still my budget king choice speaker and the ones that I go to as a reference point for my listening, here's how I sum it up, going through all the different genres that I listen to, from the hard rock, classic rock, jazz, classical music, dance, country, etc., etc., etc. The breakdown for me is it's a 70-30 split. 70% split that with the Tecton lures, with the genres that I listen to, I prefer the Tecton lures 70% of the time. With other particular genres, 30% of the time, I absolutely preferred the IOs. They do something in the upper ranges that is absolutely beautiful. As much as I wanted to beat up these tweeters, as much as I was looking for weaknesses and irritation with the price point of the sum of the parts in these speakers, I could find nothing critical. It really, they absolutely do something special, which is with a good stand monitor, a well-designed stand mount monitor, they do the typical disappearing act. So in their positions, 45 degrees off axis, mind you, these speakers do the proverbial disappearing act. With my eyes closed, bar none, there was no directionality with these speakers. It was wide open, very delicate, and absolutely lovely to listen to. When I listen to Mycia, when I listen to Norah Jones, Melody Gardot, etc., etc., that's what I was looking for. That was the expectation. Now, being 70-30, you could say whatever you want, that I paid more than twice of what the Tecton lures are to get that, that 30% better out of certain genres. With the older jazz, the 60s jazz, the 60s recordings, 50s recordings, the only time I had to actually go full straight axis, zero degree off, or fully directed at the listener, listening to Buddy Rich or listening to Art Pepper, these speakers again did something very strange, and I just did attribute it to the age of the recordings. I could not listen to these speakers off axis with the older jazz. It was very boring. It was very, oh my God, that's exactly coming out of this speaker. That's exactly coming out of that speaker. And there was very little in between. It was extremely directional. The center fell apart, and I had to tilt them in, 100% on axis, only for that older jazz. Once I put anything modern in, back to 45 degrees off axis, and these speakers were damn glorious. So it's hard for several of you to justify the doubling of the price. For me, as a reviewer and going through all the different gear I have, I'm appreciative to keep these around in the future as my reference for stand mount monitors. And it does not close the door for me on other Alta audio brands. As a matter of fact, I've written down and put in my Hi-Fi Shark listing or search that I am willing to jump on a pair of Lelantos, the floor standard that has an 8.5-inch woofer with the 6-inch mid driver, and the larger, I believe it's a 4-inch or 5-inch ribbon tweeter. It's a gorgeous speaker. I'll put a picture of that for you guys. I want to hear that speaker. I want to hear something of that size that will play down to 26 hertz. So, moving on back to these, I'm impressed for what they did from a stand mount monitor perspective. I'm more impressed with the sum of their parts. And again, I was hypercritical of these speakers, which is why I ran through all the sweep tones that I usually have not done. I will do that moving forward because it's a necessary test for you guys and for me to understand exactly what the speakers are doing in room and just how much bass is usable with each of these speakers. So having said that, I will put my scorecard also, given the attributes and the detractors as those reminders. The Alta IOs, they will live on in the future in my system for now. I will use them for particular genres that I want to pick out with classical music and jazz. For all else, the Tecton lures are still my dreamy dream speaker, and they still do so little wrong at their price points, especially their bass and their sound staging. But I have to say, I found no fault with the upper regions of these speakers, albeit the bass was a little too forceful or a little too prominent. It's the opposite of, say, a Bowers and Wilkins speaker, where they tend to have a look at me treble energy. These have a look at me bass energy, and they do an awful lot for their size with a 7-inch Dayton audio driver. I will keep them for now. They're going to be my reference monitor speaker. So, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the feedback. I've hopefully cut this one down for most of you to get to the point and stay on focus. The Zoo Dirty Weekends are on their way. I'm picking them up tomorrow, and I can't wait to do the deep dive and start tearing them apart and seeing if they will come closer to the Tecton lures moving forward. So with that, you all have a beautiful week. Let's get through this inauguration, and everybody be nice to one another. Thank you.